Florida Senator Marco Rubio is back with us in Studio 57 on the heels of his second book. He is preparing to decide whether to run for re-election next year or try for a higher office. His new book is called American Dreams, Restoring Economic Opportunity for Everyone. Senator, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It seems to me in public discourse, in the public discussion today, everyone is looking for a way to look at income inequality, look at what's happened to the middle class. That is the subject of the moment.
It is. That's why I wanted to write this book.
And everybody has a different answer.
Yeah. Well, look, I think this is why I want to write this book. My experience on it begins with the fact that it wasn't that long ago in America where if you were willing to work hard and persevere, you could eventually find a job that paid you enough to own a home, own a car, send your kids to college one day. That was our experience growing up. My dad neither one of my parents had much education, formal education, but working as a bartender and as a maid, we made it to the middle class. Fast forward to today, and that's increasingly difficult. And there are three reasons why that's happening. The first is, and they're all structural, it's not a cyclical downturn in the economy. One, we have more global competition than ever. There are other countries that now want what we have had historically over the last 30 or 40 years, and we're losing that competition increasingly. Second, many of the better paying jobs of the 21st century require skills and education that many people don't have. And third, everything costs more, and you have new costs that didn't exist. My parents didn't have a cell phone bill. Right? So all these things have conspired at a time when wages are not keeping pace with costs, and the result is this millions of people in America who feel like the American dream is slipping out of reach. And as a nation, that's problematic because it undermines our identity as a nation of equality of opportunity and upward mobility. If we don't address it, we'll lose what makes us special.
You have to run for re-election to the Senate in 2016. You are prohibited by law for running from both the Senate and the presidency at the same time. When will you make a decision about which race you'll choose to run in? Well,
first of all, actually the book is relevant to that, and I'll tell you why. This book outlines an agenda for restoring the American dream, growing and stabilizing the American middle class.
Do you need
the
to be
decision I have to
do
make?
that?
Well, that's a good question. That's a decision that I have to make. Where is the best place for me to achieve the agenda that I outlined in American Dreams? Is it in the Senate, in the majority now, or is it as President of the United States?
Isn't that an obvious answer? I mean,
well, it's interesting. Someone else said the same thing to me the other day. I think that's one of the problems we have. We've come to believe that the presidency is the...
It is the bully pulpit.
It is, but I think you can also, and again, that's one of the things I have to think through when I make this decision, but I also think you can make a very meaningful contribution, and historically many people have, from the United States Senate.
But
we shouldn't diminish that importance.
They're just saying,
right.
If you really want to change America, the best place to be is in the White House.
But it's also a question of where, at this point in your life, are you best able to serve the country? Is it in the U.S. Senate or running for president? And that's a question we'll have to have an answer to fairly
So let's
soon.
talk about the politics of running for president. I mean, we have Jeb Bush, who you were very close to politically in Florida when he was governor. You were in the legislature. And then you have Mitt Romney announcing recently that, wait a minute, I may get in myself. What does all this do to the outlook for 2016?
Well, first of all, Mitt has run for president twice, so he knows how to put a campaign together, and obviously will raise a lot of money. I think Jeb Bush, you saw reports over the weekend, he's going to raise $100 million. I certainly think he can do that, and more in the next few months. So there'll be very formidable candidates. But I just honestly believe that if you are committed to a policy agenda and you believe no one else is speaking about the issues you believe in, and you can put together a credible campaign, which I believe we can, irrespective of whoever else is in the race, you do it. And if I decide that the best place for me to serve America at this time in my life is as President of the United States, I'll run for president, and I'm confident that we can put together a campaign that makes us competitive and allows us to win.
Have you spoken to Jeb Bush recently?
I have. A lot by email. He's a great emailer. And so we've spoken.
And he released all of it.
He has, yeah. And he'll release more, I imagine. And we have, look, this is not, if I run for president, it won't be against anyone. It'll be because I believe I have an agenda that no one else is offering on our side of the aisle, and I believe I would do a better job than they would.
How much were you surprised by the Governor Romney announcement? I think that did surprise a lot of people.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, I think you've seen the trends over the last few months as you become more open to running, and that's fine. I mean, for me, I think the more quality people that run for president, the better, because it gives us a chance to debate these ideas. That's why putting it in writing was so important for me, putting it in a book. It's not the first time I've done this. When I was the Speaker of the Florida House, I had a book called 100 Innovative Ideas, and we passed every single one of those out of the Florida House and put 56 or 57 of them into law in Florida. So for me, it's about this agenda that I outline in my book, American Dreams. And I hope we can have a debate in the Republican Party about the best way to restore middle-class opportunity.
I want to get your take on Cuba because you oppose certainly the president's recent action to normalize relations with Cuba. This morning, Cuba has freed all 53 prisoners as agreed to in this deal.
Right.
Isn't that a good step forward?
So certainly for those 53 prisoners, it's great news. Unfortunately, we don't know who they are. The list has been kept secret from the world. Beyond it, our understanding from the ones that have been released is many of them were at the end of their terms anyway, and all have been warned that if they take up the cause of democracy, they'll be right back in jail. What's forgotten here is that last year, over the last 2 years alone, the Cuban government has arrested thousands of people. So 53 versus the thousands that remain in jail. And in fact, over the weekend, 2 weekends ago, they rounded up another 100-some-odd people because they plan to go to a public square and speak out in favor of freedom and democracy. And in return for all this, for these minimal changes of 53 people, and I don't mean to diminish it for those 53, but in return for that, the Cubans are getting virtually everything they want from the Obama administration. I don't have a problem with changing U.S. policy towards Cuba, but I think it has to be a reciprocal change where economic openings equals reciprocal political openings on the island.
That in fact, if in fact Cuba is opened up, it will change. Vietnam changed.
It did not change politically, nor has China, for that matter.
But it changed to a degree in terms of its economic participation.
Sure, but my interest in Cuba is freedom and democracy. I think a free people living in a democratic order have the right to choose any economic model they want, and they could even choose socialism, as many nations in Europe have done. I wouldn't recommend it, but they could choose it. My interest in Cuba is freedom and democracy, and there is no contemporary example of a country with a resistant tyranny that economic change is open. In fact, China today is as tyrannical and as oppressive as it's ever been, in some cases more so. Vietnam remains the same. Even Burma, that was the subject of an opening 2 years ago, has suddenly backtracked on some of the changes and openings that they promised to make. So my belief is that the Cuban government will pocket all of these changes to benefit the regime, which completely controls the economy, but it has already made very clear there will be no political changes on the island of Cuba, and there is no contemporary example of how a tyranny resistant to change is forced to change because of economic opening.
Quick question. Will embargo be lifted by the Congress?
I don't believe it will be lifted by the Congress until the Cuban government meets the conditions that needs to be met.
Senator Marco Rubio, good to see you. Thank you for being here.